The scorching summer sun beat down on Redemption Springs like an angry god, but nothing was hotter than the tension building between Catherine Miller and the gallows erected in the town square. Her fiancé was about to hang for a crime he didn't commit, and she was the only one who knew the truth. Catherine clutched her handkerchief as she pushed through the jeering crowd. Dust kicked up from beneath her boots, clinging to the hem of her blue calico dress as she moved. The year was 1873, and justice in the Arizona Territory often came at the end of a rope rather than in a courtroom. Please. She cried out, her voice lost among the shouts of anticipation. He's innocent, Sheriff Wilkins, a man with a belly as round as his moral compass was crooked, stood on the wooden platform beside the condemned. For the crime of robbery and murder, this court sentences Maxwell Dawson to hang by the neck until dead. Max stood with his hands bound behind his back, his face bruised but his eyes still defiant. At 28, he'd made a name for himself as one of the fastest gunslingers in the territory, but even his reputation couldn't save him now. He caught Catherine's gaze through the crowd, and in that moment she saw something that broke her heart: resignation. Let's get on with it. Someone shouted from the crowd. Hang the killer! The first laugh came from somewhere in the back, and like wildfire, it spread. They were laughing while the executioner tested the noose, while Sheriff Wilkins read the charges again, while Max was positioned over the trapdoor. Catherine felt her knees weaken. It had only been 3 weeks since she'd first met Maxwell Dawson when he rode into town. 3 weeks of stolen glances, secret meetings by the creek, and promises whispered under starlight. 3 weeks before someone robbed the Wells Fargo office and left 2 men dead. And Sheriff Wilkins had found blood on Max's saddle, blood that Catherine knew came from the deer he'd hunted to bring her family after her father had fallen ill. The hammer of the mechanism that would drop the floor beneath Max's feet was raised high. The executioner's hand rested on the lever. Stop this madness? A powerful voice cut through the laughter. The crowd fell silent as they turned to see who had dared interrupt. Standing at the edge of the gathering was a tall figure, the sun at his back creating a silhouette that struck fear into the hearts of many. Micah Daniels, known simply as the Cowboy to most, his Colt revolver already drawn and aimed at the executioner. Lower that hammer, Micah ordered, his voice carrying across the now silent square. Or the next man to die won't be Maxwell Dawson. Sheriff Wilkins's face twisted with anger. Daniels, put that gun away or I'll have you arrested for threatening an officer of the law. Micah took a step forward and the crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. I have evidence that proves Max Dawson is innocent, and I'm not leaving until everyone hears it. Catherine's heart leapt with hope. She'd sent a telegram to Micah Daniels 3 days ago, knowing that as Max's childhood friend and a Texas Ranger, he might be the only one who could help, but she hadn't expected him to arrive in time. What evidence? Sheriff Wilkins sneered. This man was caught red-handed. The real killer is here among us, Micah said, his eyes scanning the crowd. And I know who it is. A murmur rippled through the gathering. Catherine watched as Micah walked deliberately toward the gallows, his spurs jingling with each step. He was 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much death to be rattled by a corrupt sheriff. The blood on Dawson's saddle wasn't from the victims, Micah announced. It was from a mule deer he shot 3 days before the robbery. And I have 3 witnesses who saw him miles away when the murders happened. Lies, Sheriff Wilkins spat. We have a confession beaten out of him by your deputies. Catherine found her voice and stepped forward. I saw the bruises when they brought him in. The sheriff's hand moved to his gun. Miss Miller, I suggest you step back and let justice be served. Justice? Micah's voice was cold. Is that what you call framing an innocent man while the real killer goes free, or should I tell everyone about the gold coins found in your desk drawer? The same coins that were stolen from Wells Fargo. A hush fell over the crowd. Sheriff Wilkins's face paled. Lower your weapon, Daniels, ordered a new voice. Deputy Harrison, the sheriff's right-hand man, appeared at the edge of the platform, his rifle trained on Micah. Catherine saw what was about to happen before anyone else did. The deputy's finger tightened on the trigger, and without thinking, she rushed forward. Look out, she cried, pushing through the last line of onlookers just as the deputy fired. Micah spun with lightning speed, his revolver cracking like thunder. Deputy Harrison clutched his shoulder and dropped his rifle, howling in pain. The crowd scattered in panic, leaving only Catherine, Micah, the executioner, Sheriff Wilkins, and Max on the gallows. The executioner, seeing which way the wind was blowing, raised his hands and backed away from the lever. "It's over, Wilkins," Micah said, his gun now pointed at the sheriff. "The telegram I sent to the federal marshal arrived yesterday. They know everything how you and Harrison staged the robbery, killed those men, and framed Max when he refused to look the other way." Sheriff Wilkins reached for his gun, but Micah was faster. A single shot rang out and the sheriff's weapon clattered to the wooden platform. "I missed on purpose," Micah warned. "The next one won't." With trembling hands, Sheriff Wilkins raised his arms in surrender. Catherine rushed up the steps to Max, tears streaming down her face as she worked to untie the rope around his neck. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, her fingers fumbling with the knot. Max's eyes were fixed on her, full of wonder and something deeper. "You saved my life, Catherine." Once free, Max pulled Catherine into his arms, holding her as if he'd never let go again. Over her shoulder, he met Micah's gaze. "Thank you, old friend." Micah nodded, keeping his gun trained on Wilkins. Couldn't let them hang the best shot in Texas. Besides, when a lady as determined as Miss Miller sends for help, only a fool would refuse. Catherine turned in Max's embrace to face Micah. "How did you know? About the sheriff?" "I didn't," Micah admitted. "Not until I rode into town last night and heard him arguing with Harrison in the saloon. They were fighting over how to split the money. After that, it was just a matter of finding the evidence." By now, several townsfolk had returned, drawn by the lack of gunfire and their own curiosity. Among them was Judge Parker, who had presided over Max's hasty trial. "What's the meaning of this?" the judge demanded, his face flushed with either anger or the heat. Micah explained the situation, producing letters he'd found in Harrison's quarters that detailed the plan to rob the Wells Fargo office. Judge Parker listened with growing dismay, and when Micah finished, he turned to Sheriff Wilkins with disgust. "You're a disgrace to your badge," Judge Parker said. "Take him and Harrison to the jail. I'll send for the federal marshal to transport them to Yuma." Several men from the crowd stepped forward to help Micah escort the criminals away. As they left, the judge approached Max and Catherine. "Mr. Dawson, it appears a grave injustice was nearly done here today. On behalf of the court, I offer my sincere apologies." Max nodded stiffly, the marks from the rope still visible on his neck. "I appreciate that, Your Honor." "Miss Miller," the judge continued, "your faith in Mr. Dawson's innocence is commendable. Few would have fought as you did." Catherine squeezed Max's hand. "I knew the truth in my heart, sir." As the square emptied, leaving only the three of them standing beneath the grim gallows, Micah holstered his gun. "What now, Max? Going back to Texas?" Max looked down at Catherine, his eyes softening. "I don't know. I was thinking of staying in Redemption Springs a while longer." "Seems I have a reason to stick around." Catherine's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "My father's ranch could use a good hand, and a good man." Micah smiled, tipping his hat. "Then I'll leave you two to sort that out. I've got to report back to my captain in El Paso." He turned to go, but Max called after him. "Micah, will you be coming back this way?" Micah paused, looking back at his friend and the woman who had fought so bravely for him. "Count on it. Someone's got to make sure you don't get yourself into trouble again." As Micah walked away, Catherine slipped her arm through Max's. "We should get you to Dr. Thompson. Those bruises need tending." Max nodded but made no move to leave. "Catherine, what you did today, risking everything for me when most of the town had already decided I was guilty." She reached up to touch his cheek gently. "I believe in you, Maxwell Dawson. From the moment you rode into town and helped old Mrs. Jenkins with her wagon wheel, I knew you were a good man." Max caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. "I'm not sure I deserve your faith, but I promise I'll spend every day trying to." Together, they walked away from the gallows, leaving behind the shadow of death that had nearly claimed him. As they made their way through town, people stepped aside, some offering apologies, others simply watching in silence. Dr. Thompson's office was cool and quiet compared to the heat and chaos of the town square. The elderly physician clucked his tongue as he examined Max's injuries. "They worked you over good, didn't they?" he muttered, applying salve to the bruises on Max's ribs. Sheriff never did believe in gentle questioning. Catherine sat nearby, her hands folded in her lap. "Will he be all right?" "Oh, he'll live," Dr. Thompson assured her. "Young man like him, strong as an ox, just needs rest and care." He gave her a knowing look. "And I suspect he'll get plenty of that now." After the doctor finished, Catherine helped Max to her family's wagon. Her father, James Miller, was waiting for them, his weathered face lined with concern. "Thank God you're safe," he said, shaking Max's hand firmly. "Catherine never doubted you for a moment." "I'm grateful, sir," Max replied, wincing slightly as he climbed onto the wagon seat. "To both of you." James Miller clicked his tongue, setting the horses in motion. "Well, you saved my life when that fever took hold last month. Seems only fair we return the favor." As they rode to the Miller ranch just outside town, Catherine told her father everything that had happened. James listened gravely, his hands steady on the reins. "Wilkins always was a greedy son of a gun," he commented. "But murder and framing an innocent man, that's a new low even for him." The Miller ranch came into view, a modest spread with a sturdy main house, a barn, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the afternoon sun. It wasn't the biggest ranch in the territory, but it was well kept, and most importantly to Catherine, it was home. "We've prepared the spare room for you," James told Max as they pulled up to the house. "Doc says you need rest, and that's what you'll get." Max started to protest, but Catherine silenced him with a look. "You're staying, at least until you're healed. No arguments." For the next week, Max recuperated under Catherine's attentive care. She brought him meals, changed his bandages, and spent hours sitting by his bedside, reading to him or simply talking. They learned more about each other in those quiet days than they had in all the time before. Catherine told him about her mother, who had died when she was 15, and how she had taken over running the household while her father managed the ranch. Max shared stories of growing up in Texas with Micah, of joining the Rangers briefly before deciding he preferred to make his own way. "Why did you come to Redemption Springs?" she asked one evening as the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold outside his window. Max was sitting up in bed now, stronger each day. "Honestly, I was just passing through, headed to California, thought I'd stop for a night or two." He smiled at her. "Then I met you bringing those pies to the church social. One taste of your apple pie, and suddenly California didn't seem so important." Catherine laughed, a sound that Max had come to cherish. "So it was my baking that captivated you." "Among other things," he admitted, his eyes lingering on her face. By the end of the second week, Max was up and moving around. Despite Catherine's protests, he insisted on helping with the ranch work, mending fences alongside James and the two hired hands. "He's a good worker," James told Catherine as they watched Max from the porch one evening. "And a good man. I can see why you fought so hard for him." Catherine nodded, her eyes following Max as he crossed the yard. "I love him, Pa." James put an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I know you do, sweetheart, and unless I'm blind as a bat, he feels the same way about you." The next day, a rider came from town with news. The federal marshal had arrived to transport Wilkins and Harrison to Yuma Prison. Judge Parker was requesting Max's presence in town to give his formal statement. "I'll come with you," Catherine insisted as Max saddled his horse. Max hesitated. "Are you sure? It might not be pleasant." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "We face this together." They rode side by side into Redemption Springs. The town looked different, somehow quieter, more subdued. People nodded respectfully as they passed, a few even tipping their hats to Max. At the courthouse, Marshal Jenkins, a stern-faced man with a silver star on his chest, was waiting with Judge Parker. The statements didn't take long. Max described the beating he'd received, the threats, and the forced confession. Catherine testified about what she'd witnessed, including the suspicious behavior of Wilkins and Harrison in the days before the robbery. "Mr. Dawson," Marshal Jenkins said when they had finished, "the federal government owes you an apology." Your record has been cleared, and Judge Parker has authorized a compensation of $500 for your false imprisonment and nearly being executed. Max blinked in surprise. That's generous, Marshal. It's the least we can do, Judge Parker added. Though money can't make up for what you endured. As they left the courthouse, Max was unusually quiet. They collected his belongings from the jail, his gun, belt, watch, and the few personal items he'd had when arrested. $500 is a lot of money, Catherine ventured as they walked toward their horses. Max nodded, turning the envelope over in his hands. Enough to buy a small place of my own, or a good start on one anyway. Catherine's heart skipped a beat. You're thinking of settling here then? Not continuing to California. Max stopped walking and turned to face her. Catherine, I've been thinking about a lot of things these past weeks, about what matters in life, about what I want my future to look like. He took her hands in his. Before I met you, I was just drifting. No real purpose, no place to call home, but now, she prompted, hardly daring to breathe, now I know where I belong. He squeezed her hands gently. If you'll have me, that is. Before Catherine could respond, a familiar voice called out to them. Well, don't you two make a pretty picture? Micah Daniels was walking toward them, looking trail-worn but pleased. Beside him was a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Micah, Max greeted his friend warmly. I didn't expect to see you back so soon. Had to escort Mr. Reynolds here from El Paso, Micah explained, gesturing to the man beside him. He's got some business with you. The man stepped forward, extending his hand to Max. Harold Reynolds, sir. I represent the Wells Fargo Company. I understand you're the man who was wrongfully accused of robbing our office. Max shook his hand cautiously. That's right. Well, sir, Wells Fargo takes a very dim view of corrupt lawmen using our name to line their pockets. The company would like to offer you a position as a security consultant for our stagecoach lines in this territory. Max looked stunned. A job with Wells Fargo? Yes, sir. Good pay, respectable work, and you'd be based here in Redemption Springs. We're establishing a regional office and need men we can trust, Mr. Reynolds smiled. Your friend Mr. Daniels here gave you quite the recommendation. Micah shrugged when Max glanced at him, told him the truth that you're the best shot I know and honest to a fault. Catherine squeezed Max's arm, her eyes shining with pride. It sounds perfect for you. Max looked at her, then back at Mr. Reynolds. I'd be honored to accept, sir. After making arrangements to meet the following day to discuss details, Mr. Reynolds took his leave. Micah remained, a knowing smile on his face. Seems things are working out for you, Max. Thanks to you, Max replied earnestly. I owe you my life. Micah shook his head. You owe Miss Miller here. She's the one who never lost faith. He tipped his hat to Catherine. Madam, you're a force to be reckoned with, Catherine blushed. Will you stay for dinner, Mr. Daniels? My father would love to thank you properly. I'd be delighted, Micah accepted. But first, I think my friend here was about to say something important before I interrupted. Max shot Micah a look that was half gratitude, half exasperation, before turning back to Catherine. Taking a deep breath, he dropped to one knee right there on the dusty main street of Redemption Springs. Catherine Miller, these past weeks have shown me what's truly important in life. You stood by me when no one else would. You fought for me, believed in me. He took her hand in his. I love you, Catherine. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Catherine's free hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Around them, townspeople had stopped to watch, but neither Max nor Catherine noticed. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Maxwell Dawson, I will marry you. Max rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly as cheers erupted from the onlookers. Even Micah let out a whoop of celebration. When they broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Micah clapped Max on the shoulder. About time you found something worth settling down for. The three of them rode back to the Miller Ranch, where James welcomed Micah with open arms and was overjoyed at the news of his daughter's engagement. They celebrated late into the evening, sharing stories and making plans for the future. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Catherine Miller became Catherine Dawson in a ceremony held under the old oak tree on the Miller Ranch. The whole town turned out for the occasion, eager to witness the union of two people whose love had overcome such harrowing obstacles. Micah stood as Max's best man, having extended his stay in Redemption Springs to help his friend establish the new Wells Fargo security protocols. He'd grown fond of the town and was considering a permanent position there himself, especially after meeting the lovely widowed schoolteacher, Emma Barnes. As Catherine and Max exchanged their vows, the gallows that had nearly taken Max's life were nothing but a distant memory. In their place stood a new courthouse, built with donations from grateful citizens who had been fleeced by Wilkins and Harrison over the years. "I, Maxwell, take you, Catherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Max said, his voice clear and strong as he gazed into her eyes. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Catherine repeated the vows, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Max drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and devotion. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. There was dancing in the barn, festooned with lanterns and wildflowers. James Miller watched proudly as his daughter and new son-in-law twirled across the floor, surrounded by well-wishers. "Never thought I'd see the day," he commented to Micah, who was nursing a glass of whiskey beside him. "What's that?" Micah asked. "The day when those gallows nearly took an innocent man brought so much good instead." James nodded toward the dancing couple. "My daughter found true love, Max found a home, and Redemption Springs found its conscience again." Micah raised his glass in a toast, to second chances. As the night drew to a close, Max led Catherine away from the celebration and out into the quiet of the yard. Above them, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black silk. "Happy, Mrs. Dawson?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. Catherine leaned back against his chest, savoring the strength and warmth of him. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Max turned her in his arms to face him. "I still can't believe how close I came to losing everything before I even knew what I had. When I was standing on those gallows, all I could think about was you, that I'd never get to tell you how much I love you." Catherine reached up to trace the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "But Micah came. You're here now, and we have our whole lives ahead of us." "Yes," Max agreed, kissing her softly. "Thanks to a brave woman who wouldn't give up, a loyal friend with a steady aim, and perhaps a bit of divine intervention." They stood together under the stars, the sounds of the celebration fading behind them. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, a lonesome sound that only made their own togetherness more precious. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Catherine asked, her head resting against his chest. Max smiled down at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "A home of our own. Children someday, morning coffee on the porch watching the sun rise over the mountains." He kissed her forehead. "And every day I'll thank God for sending you to save me." "We saved each other," Catherine corrected him gently, "and we always will." Years later, long after Redemption Springs had grown from a rough frontier town into a prosperous community, people still told the story of Maxwell Dawson's near hanging and the brave woman who never lost faith. They spoke of Micah Daniels, who eventually became the town's sheriff after marrying Emma Barnes, and how his gun had silenced a corrupt lawman's reign. But mostly they told of love, a love strong enough to face down death itself, to stand against injustice, and to build a legacy that would last for generations to come. For Max and Catherine Dawson, the story never grew old. Each anniversary, they would sit on their porch, surrounded by their children and later their grandchildren, and remember how close they had come to never having this life together. "Tell us again, Grandpa," the children would beg, "about how Grandma saved you from the gallows." And Max would smile at Catherine, still beautiful to him after all these years, and begin. It was the hottest day of the summer, and they were laughing while the executioner tested his hammer. But then the bravest woman I've ever known refused to let an innocent man die. The laughter that had once mocked his impending death had long since been silenced, replaced by the joyful sounds of a family built on love, sacrifice, and second chances in the wild heart of the American West.